Chapter 21. Theo sat in his armchair with his eyes closed and feet resting on his leather booth as he listened to Coltrane's Love Supreme. He looked forward to Sunday mornings when the house was quiet and he could reflect in peace. He stood up now and walked to the bookshelf in search of an exemplary text. Last week his publishers had phoned to congratulate him on his manuscript. They were planning a sizable print run of his History of Nigeria, the largest, they said, of any third world history book, and naturally he felt pleased. All that written was the preface, but what did one say in a preface? He flipped through several books and then traced his fingers slowly along the mahogany bookshelf in search of one of his favorites, and there it was, The Open Society and Its Enemies. He wondered how often a preface was overlooked in a reader's eagerness to hurry on and read the rest of the book. And here was Popper's preface. Two in fact. Theo nodded to himself, dwelling for a moment on the line that spoke of the need to break from the customary deference shown to great men. He reached for pen and paper and carried his selection of books to his desk. For years now, Theo had been writing about Nigeria's problems. He believed that greed and mismanagement were the root causes of oil corruption and a broken civil service. He also believed that the West, through the World Bank in particular, exacerbated his country's problems, but he was cautious with this argument, knowing its potential to detract from what could be done at home. He was also determined never to treat Nigeria's problems as insurmountable, and in 1984, when others were saying that the country's many cultures and ethnic groups were never meant to coexist, Theo disagreed. He had no patience for the Afro-pessimism mentality, which he saw as lending credence to the many racist historians of Africa. Instead, he firmly maintained that in spite of his country's numerous coups and despots, events could still change for the better. History, as Popper argued, was not deterministic, and he would acknowledge him in his preface, alongside colleagues and friends, not forgetting family of course. The book would be dedicated to Vanessa, and to his father for being a tireless civil servant in pursuit of a better Nigeria. Theo shifted in his chair, sensing that something had fallen from his trouser pocket. He reached down, expecting to retrieve pound notes, but instead found a sheet of paper in his wife's hand. Writing. It was yesterday's shopping list scribbled on medical paper advertising an unpronounceable medication. Wretched pharmaceutical companies. Muttered to himself. Wouldn't it be nice if companies handed out free medicines instead of useless bits of paper promoting fancy experimental drugs? This was yet another of Nigeria's problems, the questionable role of multinationals. He read the shopping list. Maggi cubes. Corn oil, large size. Tomato puree. Treetops squash, mango or lemon. Ribena. Bournvita. Lipton's tea. Quaker oats. Margarine, Flora. Babybel Dutch cheeses, pick coldest. Dairy cheese. Wall's ice cream. Golden syrup, not local brand. Omo. Lux, and 1 bar Imperial leather. Not many husbands helped with domestic chores, but Theo felt it only fair. After all, his wife worked out of the home just as much as he did, more if you counted her night shifts. Like most professionals, they employed a house servant and gardener, but some things they preferred to take care of themselves. Most Saturday mornings, she gave him a list and he would do the Kingsway shop %, while she haggled with the traders selling fresh fruit and vegetables in the car park outside. She enjoyed bargaining and was good at it. He was not, hence his relegation to Kingsway. Usually, after the food shopping, she liked to stop at Challenge Christian bookshop, and he used this time to browse arts and crafts displayed in their stalls across the street. She didn't like him to buy from these traders, whom she claimed inflated their prices for tourists, but occasionally he chose something small, some glass beads or a leather bag, for his daughter. He knew the prices were high, but they were still far cheaper than the imported trinkets sold in Kingsway's household section. He never made a fuss about this to his wife, but he didn't like it when Nigerians shunned local products, preferring to import all manner of things like Quaker oats and golden syrup bearing the royal stamp of approval, by appointment to Her Majesty the Queen. Theo shook his head at the hypocrisy of it all, wishing his wife could see things his way, yet he knew he was being unfair, petty even, to criticize her. If she wanted her few overseas luxuries, so be it. She worked hard for them. Theo stretched his arms out in front of him and, interlacing his fingers, pushed them out further to loosen his muscles. Yesterday, after shopping, he had gone with Guam and David to the abattoir to buy half a cow. Guam White and David Wiseman were neighbors who, like them, lived in the new university homes on the Bauchi Road, identical four-bedroom bungalows with sizable back gardens. They had spent a pleasant afternoon at Guam's house, cutting the meat and portioning it into plastic bags for the women to freeze, but today Theo was feeling the after-effects of their hard work. Every arm muscle ached, which made him doubly glad for the day of rest. It seemed that the older he got, the more he looked forward to the peace and quiet of Sunday mornings. Did he miss going to church? Not really. He still believed in God, or at least in the existence of a supernatural being, but he had grown disenchanted with organized religion. He disliked the newer services and found it embarrassing to watch people crying and confessing their so-called sins in public. He viewed the speaking in tongues with great suspicion and did not care much for St. Mark's congregation. It seemed church members worried more about displaying the latest fashions and newest German cars than in humbly worshipping God. His family had taken issue with him. He hardly attended services, so how could he know what congregations were like? So Theo had learned to keep his views to himself, and, while his wife and daughter worshipped at church, he played his records and read the papers. These days he listened less to high life and the jazz of his youth and more to the serious jazz of artists like Coltrane, whose music kept him company now. As he started to read the local papers, he bought Punch and New Nigerian out of habit, and always with the hope of finding something worthwhile in between the excess of advertisements, obituaries, memorials and other social announcements. The more serious international paper, the Weekly Guardian, he saved for last. It kept him abreast of international news with a selection of articles sourced from Le Monde, The Guardian, and The Washington Post. Theo realized that he must have drifted off to sleep. The papers had slipped from his lap and the family was back. Kearney eagerly waved her Sunday school coloring in front of his face. "Do you like it, Daddy?" "It's beautiful." He smiled, preparing to add it to his already large collection of fishermen, shepherds, and babies in mangers. "Not the coloring. My autograph." She pointed to her name scribbled in joined-up letters. "I see. I'm going to save it," Kemi said, whisking the paper from his hands and skipping off to her room. "Miriam," Theo called, wondering where she had gone. He stood up and went to the bedroom where he found her changing out of her Sunday clothes into a looser-fitting dress. He slipped his arms around her waist, hoping for a few minutes of intimacy, but Miriam wriggled free, intent on getting dressed. Theo sighed, wondering why he bothered. There had been a time when she would lean back in his arms, and be affectionate and playful. He thought of those times as he went to look for a jacket. It was a tradition in the Ajayi household to have lunch at Yelwa Club one Sunday a month. It was one of the few surviving country clubs established by the British in colonial times and was located on the outskirts of Bukuru, a 30-minute drive from the Ajayi home. Theo frequently took younger lecturers, and sometimes students, to the club for a peaceful drink or a stroll around their grounds. He liked to play squash there, too, but Sundays at Yelwa were always reserved for the family, and today they would be meeting the Abubakars. On their drive to the club, Theo had hoped to listen to the news, but he was out voted. He never seemed to win when Miriam and Kemi were both in the car. Let's play the Woombles music, Kemi clamored from the back seat. Please, Daddy. Please, Mummy. Please. So they listened to the Woombles for a while until Theo could stand it no longer, and Miriam changed the cassette to one of her American gospel tapes. Theo didn't mind gospel, but found the musical arrangement irritating when it hopped haphazardly from slow to fast tracks. Albums should either be fast or slow, Theo mused as he swung the wheel to avoid a pothole. They had taken the Joe's Mayango Road, passing the Nasco Biscuit Factory, Treba Sweets, and their Coca-Cola bottling plant. Most of these factories were closed at the weekend, but a few factory chimneys still spewed their dirty gases, staining the sky brown. "Are you okay, Miriam?" he asked, knowing that the factory emissions made her nauseous. She had wound up her window and was caressing her stomach. "I'm fine," she replied, sliding a hand onto his knee. He squeezed the hand and gently massaged her fingers. Miraculously, after all these years, Miriam's belly was full again with a child. So many miscarriages. And now this. He squeezed her hand once more. Seeing her happy made him feel better, and he thought of the unborn child. When people asked him if he wanted a baby girl or a baby boy, he would always say that he hoped simply for a healthy child, but of course he wished for a boy. With a son he could play football and build model ships. His boy would be studious like his daughter, but also a sportsman. He had already thought of names: Adonai Oluwakeod, Pell. Adonai after his father, and Pell, of course, after Pell. He had even thought of adding Segun to the names in honor of his own country's footballer, Segun Adegbami. And wasn't that the beauty of giving many names to one's child? Except, of course, that they couldn't all revolve around sports. When they arrived at the club, Theo parked the car in the shade of some frangipanies. It was the coolest spot and close to where they would eat. "Rankadidi," Ibrahim called out in greeting as they entered the lounge. "Sanu," Theo replied, smiling to himself at the waiter's exuberance. "Make I go get drinks, sir?" Ibrahim asked. Yes, the usual. That meant a dubonnet for him, Fanta for Miriam and a Sprite for Kemi. In Theo's 7 years of coming to Yelwa Club, little had changed. The sweet and spicy aroma of curry always hung in the air, accompanied by the clatter of pots and pans from the kitchens in the back. Then there was the put-put sound from people playing pool in an adjoining room, and the steady whir from overhead steel fans that blew a gentle breeze. The decor, too, remained the same: velvet settees, leather-topped side tables, withering cacti and African violets in clay pots. Clear were also two oversized pictures hanging from their wall, one of Her Majesty the Queen, the other of President Shagari. Furore. The open doors. Teo could hear faintly the excited sounds of children playing by the pool. Miriam and Kemi stood up to go outside while he waited for the drinks. He watched them leave and then gazed for a moment at the president's picture. Others had preceded this president behind the same glass frame, and Teo hoped that sooner rather than later this one, too, would be replaced. While he had celebrated Nigeria's return to civilian rule, Teo now believed that the only way to bring this country to its senses was to install the military, not forever, but for a short while, to restore law and order. Professor Ajayi, my honorable good friend, Yusuf's voice rang out across the lounge. My honorable good friend, Teo answered, standing up to greet Yusuf, whose stomach was what greeted people first these days, a decidedly large and unorthodox Muslim beer belly. People joked that Yusuf's size came with the good life. He had recently been appointed district manager for Napa, while his wife held a senior position at NTA. However, life for the Abubakars was not as easy as it looked from the outside. They had lost their first two children to sickle cell anemia, and for a long time didn't know whether the youngest would suffer the same fate. Thankfully, Isaac and Dari were healthy. Yusuf embraced Teo tightly in his danshiki, and then moved on to greet others whom he recognized in the lounge. Teo marveled at Yusuf's temperament, always jovial, and seemingly at ease in any setting. By the time Yusuf had dispensed all his greetings, the whole room smelt of his cologne. He had made his mark. Yusuf knew everyone in Jos, from the Lebanese, Indian, and British, to the Nigerians. 1 minute he could be heard speaking pidgin, then Hausa or English, with the Yorkshire accent he had never lost, and even some Yoruba these days, depending on who happened to be around. And it wasn't just linguistics that Yusuf juggled with so smoothly, but everything, it seemed to Teo, right down to the clothes he wore. Today, it was a danshiki, but he might just as easily have donned a safari jacket or a three-piece suit. Yusuf had the sort of personality that Teo associated with those best tuned to life in Nigeria, that seamless ability for social metamorphosis, which he sometimes envied. Cultural juggling did not come naturally to Teo, and Miriam was always reminding him of the fact, saying that he was far too English in the way he dressed, in the music he listened to, and in his preference for speaking English rather than Yoruba. He took it as teasing, even though it sometimes felt like a series of rebukes, as though Miriam held it against him. And it wasn't just Miriam, but his brothers and sisters, even Bissy, who told him he had too much Oinbo mentality for his own good, yet, for all his so-called Western thinking, he refused to leave Nigeria to live abroad. Nigeria was home for his soul, if not entirely home for his mind. His friends and family maintained that in the past, he had been more carefree, but he disagreed. Except for his approach to religion, he remained the same. It was society, he told them, not he, that had. Look at you, my dear, you're looking splendid, Joy said to Miriam, spot changed. Is that so? But I'm tired, Shah, Miriam replied, grasping the sides of her. Her stomach was big like a watermelon, and it made Teo anxious. Ald. Abdomen. tied, as he had done when she was carrying Kemi, that her slender frame notwithstand the pregnancy. How many months is it now? Joy asked. 5, Kemi answered for Miriam, before dashing back outside to play with the other children. Teo remembered how Miriam had at first wanted to keep it a secret from Kemi until it became visible. He did not hold strongly to these cultural beliefs, but played along for Miriam's sake, although in the end there was little they could hide from a curious 6-year-old. Professor Ajay is a very lucky man, Yusuf chuckled, grasping Teo again by the shoulders. You're looking stunning, my dear Miriam. As does Joy, Teo thought wistfully, finding Joy carefree and sensuous in the way that Miriam used to be. The 1 o'clock gong sounded, and Teo led both families to the long table, where waiters in white suits and red kamapans were serving the guests white basmati rice and bright yellow curry. It was then self-service from a line of silver trays, each with its own condiment, shredded coconut, green pickles, purple onion rings, sultanas, tangerine segelnuts, sliced banana, and tomato. Soft white rolls were brought to the table with shavings of butter floating in ice water to keep them from melting. There's going to be a coup soon, Yusuf announced when every one was seated. But until the BBC says so, it's all rumor, Teo asserted, smiling to himself at this unconscious borrowing from his father. He remembered Baba saying it on the weekend of Nigeria's second military coup, and Teo had wondered then whether Baba really believed that the first accurate news would come from their BBC, or whether he had made the announcement to distract the men from their anxieties. We just need a strong ruler, Yusuf broke into Teo's thoughts. Someone who can bring discipline to this country. Corruption. That's the problem with this place, corruption. Wallahi. Yusuf pounded the table with his fist. We need a dictator. Like Rawlings. Even Idi Amin, he added, shaking his arm to straighten the Rolex that hung loosely around his wrist. How about Jimmy Carter? Kemi suggested. Please Yusuf, don't exaggerate, Joy said, ignoring Kemi's question. The Abubakar children spoke only when spoken to, and Teo worried that he and Miriam had spoiled Kemi. Baba would certainly not have stood for so many interruptions, and yet Teo knew he should not compare. He had never wanted to be as strict as his father. No, I'm serious, Yusuf insisted. I'm telling you that unless this country is ruled by force, we're all doomed. Yes, now, force. Just look at our property. Did we tell you, Teo, what happened when we came back from Florida last year? We got to our place, our place where we're building our small palace, and there was no cement, no bricks, no nothing. The workers were stealing them and then carrying them to their villages to build their menin. So I sacked them, all of them. Wallahi. Look, Nigerians are just too corrupt, he insisted. It's true, Teo nodded. This business of corruption is so bad. When I travel these days I'm embarrassed to show my passport. Precisely, Yusuf stabbed the air with his fork. You see, you watch one passing so smoothly through those immigration places in Europe, but when they take your Nigerian passport, the way they look at you, it's an insult. That's why one got myself a British passport. Yes, now the end justifies the means, isn't? Was Jimmy Carter a dictator? Kemi persisted. No, he was a Democrat. But not a Democrat zero, Yusuf laughed. And did you hear about that professor of economics? Teo interrupted. No. Which one is that now? Yusuf laughed in anticipation. Last month, Teo began, the university passed on a candidate to the committee stage. This fellow from Oxford, innocent something or other. I wasn't involved in the recruiting, mind you, but I just wanted to meet the applicant, a fellow Oxford chap and all that. Of course. We all know your reputation, Teo, Joy smiled. Always looking out for younger colleagues. Isn't that so? Well, Teo shrugged nonchalantly so as not to appear flattered. Harbour, Teo, you're too humble my friend, Yusuf insisted. Anyway, I called Innocent to my office, Teo continued, and straight away I knew something was fishy about the chap. He was sort of shifty looking. And telling me he didn't have much time to talk. And then I asked him which college he attended at Oxford. Do you know what he said? What did Mr. Innocently say? Yusuf asked, already laughing. Oxford College. Why is that funny? Kemi insisted. So then I thought, let me just have some fun with this innocent chap, Teo continued, and I asked him, did you read economics at Oxford? Of course. As you know, there's no economics course at Oxford, only PPE. But this man just nodded saying, yes, yes, yes. And then he paused, trying not to laugh. But Yusuf and Joy were laughing so hard that it made it difficult not to do their same. And then I said, so was Marx one of your tutors? Of course, the chap replied. Yes, Karl Marx, he added. So there I was even giving the foolish man the benefit of the doubt asking if he knew Daniel Marx, and the chap thinks I'm talking about Karl Marx. Teo struggled to keep a serious face. So then one asked him if he meant the one who died in 1883. And what did he say? Carly. Yusuf's loud laughter, punctuated by fists pounding on the table, now had come on tap. Yusuf spoke in fits and starts. You exaggerate too much. The whole room going. Simply need a God-fearing man in power, Miriam remarked, her words. But I like this story. Oh. That's landing like a fly swat against their merriment. Well, we need someone who is not corrupt. Teo wiped his eyes. Why? Teo wondered, did Miriam had nothing against the suggestion itself. What we need? Someone like a Walawo? Ways insist on a God-fearing man? But the predictability of Miriam's responses and their simplicity annoyed him. Even more than their daughter's interruptions. Yet, when he had first met Miriam it had been that very simplicity, her youth, and her unwavering faith in God that he had liked. So why did these things now bother him? At least she hadn't joined the Aladura Church or any of the cults popping up like anthills all over the country. He would never dismiss religion or faith, but he wished she were more questioning, or could at least engage with other people's ideas, the way Joy did, for example. There was so much that he wanted to do, so much he wished to change in his country, yet Miriam showed very little interest. In the early years it hadn't been like this. They had discussed things together. She had read literature and taken an interest in the courses he taught, but now she confined her reading to the Bible and Christian pamphlets. He could not but wish she had never fallen pregnant all those years ago. And then all the trauma and heartbreak of losing the baby had made things even worse. Doubly tragic. But no, he wasn't being fair. They had both decided to try to make it work, and Mavbit had worked as well as could have been expected. Meanwhile, Yusuf was still talking and teasing Teo about a Walawo. I'm telling you. Awalawo is corrupt, no be so. Yusuf turned to Ibrahim, who had begun to clear their plates. So Ogar, when you go be president? Ibrahim asked, looking in Teo's direct underscore. Shan. Me? You want make I die? Never. Teo laughed. Make you bring me some of that your fruit salad. And do you have sherry trifle? Yusuf requested. Yes, sir. We also have bird eye custard and ice cream. A hen, then make you bring all of Den's. Yes, sir. Ibrahim dashed off to join the rest of the amused waiters, who stood idly in a line at the back of the room. Look at this man, our black American brother, Yusuf exclaimed, pointing to a new arrival. It was Quaim, who had come with some friends for lunch. Teo stood up and they chatted for a while. So how do you know Quaim? Teo asked, once the desserts arrived and Quam had left. We play tennis. The man's an Arthur Ashe, you know. I didn't realize he was that good. Shows how little you know about your university colleagues. He used to be a Black Panther too? As well, of course I knew that. Teo smiled. He's a good man, so dedicated to our country, Yusuf mused. Teo nodded. They were all close friends now, but he remembered when Quaim first arrived at the university and was suspicious of him. It was only when Teo told Quam about his admiration for Brother Malcolm and their fiery Oxford debate of 1964 that Quam grew more relaxed in his presence. Perhaps, Teo mused, Quaim, like Miriam, had found him too English and not quite African enough. The children, as always, had finished their ice cream seconds and well eager to play in the pool, so the women took them away while and Yusuf, Karl Marx Jr. and Professor Yusuf repeated, shaking his. Who knows? Teo laughed as they stood up. But the man was smart enough at least to try bluffing his way into university. They walked slowly across the courtyard, past the building where the annual horticultural show took place and where Scottish dancing was taught on Sunday evenings, the last vestiges of colonial days that seemed destined to linger. Now Teo, remind me again, when is the Babf due? We're told the last week in August. Inshallah. Good. Very good. Yusuf stared ponderously at his snakeskin slippers. So, are you still considering that job at Birmingham University? Yes, still deciding. Tavo didn't need Yusuf to remind him that it was an attractive offer. It was a chance to teach in the African Studies Center while completing his own research towards a PhD, yet he was reluctant to accept. Of course life would be better in England, offering a more conducive academic environment, and greater financial security, but he felt an obligation to remain in Nigeria if for no other reason than for his students. And what does Miriam say? She thinks we should go. You know you owe it to your family. You must be very careful. Teo, how? You criticize the government these days. I take it Miriam told you to say that? Look, my friend, you think we don't read your articles in the paper? You have to be careful, Teo, I'm telling you. These guys aren't the small thugs we used to fight in Bradford. These ones have guns and armies, my friend. But you know as well as I do that this government is corrupt. Yes, and that's why I say we need a dictator. I don't want any of my friends losing their jobs for the sake of politics, and I'm not even going to mention loss in your life. So what do you propose? Look, Teo, you're right to blame our leaders, but they don't work alone. They dance with Western governments and oil multinationals, and each one of them is taking a slice of our national cake. I don't need to tell you that. Teo shook his head and sucked his teeth in irritation. But Yusuf, change has always come from individuals, and we first need to fix our problems at home before thinking of changing the World Bank and all those people. Remember Nehru and Gandhi, Martin Luther King. Look, Teo, you know I can't talk books like you, but I can tell you one thing for sure. In this, our country, don't make waves alone. Why don't you go? Teo glanced at his wife sitting with Joy by the side of the pool, and sighed. Into business instead? Take a break from the teaching. He resented people who criticized the government and yet did nothing to change the status quo. Admittedly, Yusuf was not as bad as Ike, who had joined the government talking about the need for change from within while changing nothing. Yusuf wasn't that bad, but the suggestion to go into business was silly, and Teo had heard the line too often. He was fed up with it, and, if anything were to drive him back to Europe, it would be this growing lack of respect for the pursuit of knowledge. He did sometimes wonder if he should have stayed in Europe in their first place, forging a serious career many years earlier. And not just for his career. Other things might have been better too. You have a good family, Yusuf repeated, as though he had read Teo's thoughts and decided to challenge them. As do you, Teo muttered, watching his daughter dive underwater and out again. Look, Daddy. She gasped. I'm doing synchronized swimming like at their Olympics. I can see that, Teo smiled. Show me some more. Kemi trod water and raised her hands high in the air. Does it look good, Daddy? Beautiful, Teo smiled. Sometimes when he saw Remy it seemed impossible that she had grown so big. It felt like yesterday when he had held her in the palm of his hands, and now look at her, a potential Olympic swim. Oh, I almost forgot. I brought you some papers, Teo added, taking them from his briefcase so Yusuf could borrow them. Yusuf thumbed approvingly through the Weekly Guardians. And when you've finished, I'd like that article back. Teo pointed to one he had circled. Yusuf studied the paper and read the title aloud. African authors write back. Do you have a mention in this? Teo nodded. His children's stories were mentioned. They were gaining greater international acclaim these days, too. But that wasn't WHV. The article was important to him. Hey, make you treat my papers properly. Don't bend them 11,011. T0 ordered, stopping Yusuf from rolling the paper into a tube. Nah, just paper now, Yusuf protested. It's not just paper, my friend. It's the person who wrote it. Vanessa Richardson. Yusuf read the name without recognition. Teo nodded, thinking for a moment that he would remind Yusuf of who she